Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors webinar series on employing individuals in China. You've joined us for day 4, part 4 of this webinar series. On Monday, we were looking at critical labor law questions. On Tuesday, we were looking at visa applications for foreigners looking to be expatriated to China. Yesterday, we were looking at individual income tax and the new policies that will be implemented from January 2022 onwards. And today we're going to be looking at social insurance obligations. I've only got Victoria on here today. So Victoria, if you'd be so kind, just chatting into the chat box what you might be. Are you a newbie? Are you a startup? Or are you an experienced China hand? Again, these are always just useful ways for me to understand who's in the audience and having a little bit of background about the audience. So Victoria, you're a startup. Thanks a lot. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation if you've got any. Just how the webinar works. So we're using Zoom meeting. So I've got the participants list up. If anybody pops into the waiting room, I'll add them. So bear with me if that does happen. If I run into any technical issues, it does take me about 1 minute to 2 minutes to reboot the system. So please don't exit. I will be coming back on to finish today's presentation. If you run into any problems, just know we are recording today's session. I'll be up on our YouTube channel by the end of today. Feel free to ask questions. The whole point of these webinars is to educate yourself. When we're talking about China, there is no dumb questions, so ask away. Don't be shy, or place comments as well. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I'm a leading expert on inbound investment into China, meaning that 100% of my clients are foreign investors in the Chinese market. I have been in the corporate services sector for the last 17 years, purely associated with the Chinese market. And I've helped over 500 companies with their market entry analysis, advisory, implementation, and ultimately growth. We have a bunch of methodologies that we have created because in China now, a lot of the systems are pretty standard procedures, not like compared to 17 years ago. So if you are interested in understanding about the China roadmap, saving your brand in China, the China Incorporation Blueprint, how to grow your business with your Chinese accountant, how to choose the right people in your China corporate management, or how to recruit and employ your first employees in China, then go to our website and you can download those webinars. I am also a new author. We've launched a book on Amazon called The 9 Superpowers to Succeed in China, which offers you the tools and tips of the trade in terms of designing your own market entry plan and trying to eliminate all the obstacles that could potentially fall in your journey. If you're interested in purchasing it, you can buy the Kindle and hard copy version. So to start today's presentation, we're going to look at social insurance obligations in China. So what we're covering is basically the fundamental, what social insurances are there and explaining them, and housing fund as well. We're going to look at the employer obligations, calculation of social insurance, impact of social insurance on foreigners. Is social insurance a burden for employers in China, and just tips for employers regarding social insurance in China? Why are we concerned by social insurance? Well, for the following reasons. One, companies don't include them in their budgets. They don't realize the financial impact that social insurance has when looking at compensation salaries for individuals. When HR audits occur, the discovery in many companies is that the social insurance is not properly paid or declared for, leading into areas of risk for the companies. And last but not least, many companies use intermediaries to hire individuals in China. And again, through chance and luck, it is discovered that many of these intermediaries either do not pay social insurance at all, or do not declare them appropriately so that the social insurance values that the employees receive is lower than they should be getting, which can lead into issues should there be medical emergencies, maternity leave, whatever the case is. Now, one thing that I just want to highlight here is if you are based in the UK, if you're based in the US, if you're based in Canada, if you're based in Germany, wherever in the world that you are based, would you not be concerned if your company didn't offer you the right social insurance? I'm going to let that hang there because a lot of people strive for that in their own home jurisdictions. But to save cost, they try to eliminate that in China. And I do not understand why. This is a mandatory requirement for Chinese employees to obtain social insurance. It is fundamental, basic right for employees. But for some reason, foreign companies want to try to diminish the cost, eliminate it, God knows what, all right? And it does make me really angry. Because in your own home jurisdiction, this is a fundamental right that you obtain from your own companies. So why do you think that your employees in China should not be getting that same right? And you might think, well, of course we're going to cover it. Of course we're going to pay for it. Trust me, there are many companies in China who have that initial belief, but when it comes time to the actual implementation of the organization, they will always try to lower that cost. So in China, there are two schemes. There's the social insurance scheme and there's the housing fund. We are going to separate those because housing fund is paid to a different organization compared to the other social insurance items. So you've got pension, work injury insurance, medical insurance, maternity insurance, and unemployment insurance, which are the basic five that are paid towards the tax bureau. The housing fund is a mandatory insurance, but that is paid to another organization, okay? As you can see from this slide, the employee and the employer pays a portion into the Social Security network. For pension, medical, unemployment, and housing, both employee and employer contribute. For maternity and work injury insurance, it is only the employer that contributes. Okay, but there are these 6 items that are mandatory. So let's go through these 6 items one by one and explain what that actually means. So the first is pension. An individual can receive a pension based on the amount accumulated in his or her individual fund after retirement. Okay. Now, what I have noticed is that most young employees, young newly graduates, their concern is never related to pension. They are more concerned about what comes into their net pockets. So they are more easily manipulated by the companies to lower their base salaries, which ultimately means they pay a lower social insurance, and the employer does this for a reason, so that actually they've got a higher allowance amount that is then non-impacted by the social insurance. Once you have employees that get older and they start hitting the ages of 40, 45, pension becomes a real issue. And this is where they then say, we want to change our packages around that the full amount gets put into the social insurance so that in the end, they get a higher amount in their pocket every month for social insurance, which they then can receive upon retirement, okay? In general, you need at least 15 years of contribution prior to being able to receive any form of pension. This is applicable to both foreigners and locals, okay? Retirement age in China for women is 55, for men it's 60. So it's actually very young period. Once they've hit that retirement age, if they want to continue working, the employer has no obligation to pay and contribute into the social insurance. So you would only have to pay a salary to those individuals if they decide to continue working after the ages of 55 or 60, which is happening more and more often now. Medical insurance is very standard, okay? Medical insurance is basically an insurance where you are ill, you're sick, you need to get treatment, and that treatment is covered by the medical insurance. portion, okay? It will reimburse all of the medical expenses. Now, again, if you have foreign employees in China, it's just to note, the medical insurance is only applicable to Chinese hospitals and Chinese clinics, not to the international clinics that are established in China. So this leads on to the point of whether you should be supplementing the medical insurance through other forms of insurance that are outside of the social insurance aspects. This is always an added benefit, especially for foreigners that are in China. You do want to consider medical insurance that is outside of that. In Shanghai, for example, and I'll be touching on this later on in the presentation, in Shanghai, for foreigners, there is no obligation for companies to pay into the social insurance network. So it is important to think about having at least a medical insurance for them. It is always an advantage, especially for older employees, to have more medical insurance available for themselves and their families. So I always consider it as an added benefit to their compensation package. Unemployment insurance is in the case of redundancy. So in the event of redundancy, the employee can claim unemployment benefits with a maximum of 12 months of salary, which is based on the last salary that they received from the company, from a company, okay? And that's it, that's just unemployment insurance. And again, in cities where foreigners are involved, they can also obtain this package. But the issue with them is the visa aspect. They need a visa to remain in China, right? The next one is work-related injury insurance. So this covers all treatments in relation to injuries that have occurred on the job, whether that is in the office, whether that is in the transportation to and from the office or to and from clients, or if they are blue-collar workers, that is the injuries that might be created through working with machines, tools, etc. Okay. So again, this work-related injury insurance is there to pay for that treatment that is specifically designated as a work-related injury. And obviously needs to be filed and designated as such. Maternity insurance, funnily enough, is paid to both women and men. And basically it is during the maternity leave, the employee receives reimbursement from the insurance. The insurance fund is based on the average salary that the women are receiving. And men can also receive these benefits as well. Not that they go on maternity leave, but that they can receive benefits if they do have children. Housing fund obligations. Again, I've put this separate from social insurance for the main reason that it is not part of the Social Security system. It is paid into a separate area. So here, basically, employers are required to make contributions for the statutory housing. In the end of the day, the funds are accrued and employees can use those funds to pay initial down payments, make repayments on mortgages, ultimately purchase a house, okay? So that's the housing fund aspect. Now, I have added in 2 additional items because I think it is important to know that as your employees get older, they may request to have supplemental insurance be paid by the company. So one of them would be health insurance, a general health insurance, which is added on to the statutory social insurance items. In many instances, this can be paid through the social insurance funds and not through a separate medical insurance, okay? It just basically increases the premium that the employee is obtaining, and they have more ability for reimbursement in terms of serious illness, in cases such as cancer and whatnot, where there's longer treatments that are required. You can also obtain supplemental housing fund insurance. So where at Woodburn, for example, we offer this additional health insurance aspect. We don't offer the addition for the housing fund, but it is an option for companies to consider if they're looking to offer that as an incentive to their employees. Again, it's not mandatory. So what are the employer's obligations? Okay. Ultimately, the employer and the employee are obligated to make contributions. Now, having said that, there are some companies where they basically tell the employee, we will cover the full insurance payment so that nothing is being paid out of your own salary. And that's just, again, another incentive. Not many companies do that. Most companies do the share of employer contributes, employee contributes, okay? It is up to the employer to make sure that the calculations are correct, that the payments are withheld and are remitted to the tax bureau who does the collection of all the social insurances. Housing fund is sent into a separate fund. It's not sent to the tax bureau, okay? It is also the employer's responsibility to make sure that the social insurances are paid timely and are paid to the employees. Any late contribution will result in penalties, financial penalties, okay? And if there are severe or multiple violations, which generally occur because of denouncement from employees, the company could be put on a blacklist by the Labor Bureau, which could lead into frozen assets, frozen bank accounts, because you have not been calculating or paying the social insurances on time. These strict penalties have arisen in the last 2.5 years and are vital because, again, my belief is, and as the belief of the Chinese government, that it is a right for every single employee in China to receive their social insurance on a timely basis and with the right value, okay? In terms of the calculation of the social insurance, this is very hard for me to put on a slide because, first of all, the contribution base is a figure that is determined by the employee's average income from the previous year, okay? For new hires, you use the starting salary as the base, all right? The base has a floor and a ceiling to it. There's a minimum base and a maximum base. This has nothing to do with minimum wage. It has to do with a minimum and maximum base to make the calculation for the social insurance. Every year, the social insurance rates are updated. In Shanghai, they usually do it in the month of June, July, or August. Okay, there's never a fixed month, unfortunately. On average, it's around end of July, end of June, end of July. But this is updated on an annual basis, which means that the social insurance will vary year on year, and it will generally go higher. And the base is determined by the employee's initial salary and then by the average salary that that employee has received from the previous year's income. Here, these are figures from July 2020 for various cities in China. I've used the main ones of Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and then Chongqing, okay? These are the percentage rates that are utilized to calculate the social insurances, okay? It's not as clear-cut as that because, as I said, there's a minimum base and a maximum base. Once the employee has reached the maximum base because of his salary, the social insurance amount will always remain the same, even if the salary goes further and further up, okay? So if you are looking to determine what an individual's social insurance will be, you first need to know where they're going to be based, okay? I.e. where they're residing. Sorry, let's backtrack. They need to first know where the company is based, registered. They need to know where the employee is going to be residing and what is the hukou of that employee. The hukou is the family book, which dictates where the ultimate residency of that employee is, okay? So you have to look at those three components. Where is the company registered? Where is the employee residing? And what is that employee's WHO code? All right. And that will then determine what will be the social insurance rate. So it is very hard for me to give you an approximate calculation because it really depends on the company and the individual's situation. All right. So just generally, I'm going to recap this because I think it's really important. The social insurance contribution base is a figure that is determined by the employee's average salary. For new hires, you're going to use the starting salary as the base for the Social Security calculation. There is a minimum base and there is a ceiling base. So there's a minimum and a maximum. When you are between the minimum and the maximum base, you are going to calculate on these percentage rates times the salary. When you hit the maximum, you will calculate from that point on the social insurance from that maximum rate onwards. Okay. If you've got any questions on the calculation, please let me know. Just type it into the chat section of the box. All right. So as of 2011, in general, foreign employees have been required to participate in China's social insurance scheme. Okay. There are major inconsistencies based on where the foreigners reside and where the company is registered. So cities like Beijing, Shenzhen, Tianjin, Nanjing, they treat foreign employees the same as domestic workers, meaning that social insurance payments are compulsory, which just basically implies that the compensation for a foreign employee in those cities is going to be higher than other cities. In Shanghai, there is no requirement for foreign employees to contribute towards the social insurance, which means the employers also are not required to contribute to the social insurance. There were always rumors that at some point Shanghai would say, from today, you've got to pay. And then there were rumors that you would have to backdate it to 2011. We are now in 2021. It's been 10 years. There's been nothing of that actually appearing. So Shanghai right now is the best city in terms of social insurance because there's no obligation to foreign employees. In a place like Dalian, foreign employees are only required to pay pension and medical insurance. They are not required to pay any of the others or contribute to any of the other types of social insurance. So like I said, for foreign employees, you really have to look at where the company is registered, where the employee is residing to understand how this will impact them. Is social insurance a burden for employers in China? Okay, I'm going to reiterate that question. Is social insurance a burden for employers in other jurisdictions? Actually, nobody asked that question because it's mandatory. And I hate it when companies say that in China. You would never question that you've got to pay social insurance in the US or in Germany or wherever else, or, but in China, for some reason, they're always asking that question. From my perspective, it's not a burden. It's an aid to companies to make sure that their employees are properly and fairly treated, okay? Social Security payments is something that is vital for the well-being of your employees because it offers pension, it offers medical insurance, work injury-related insurance, and all of that. An advantage of it is that you can deduct those costs from the corporate income tax. It can protect businesses from risk and save costs in certain circumstances. And I'm going to highlight a case study on this. And it can also help in recruiting talents, especially if you provide the additional benefits on top of the mandatory items. Now, I'm going to offer you a story where I had a company who used an intermediary, a supplier actually in China, who eventually was hiring 5 employees on their behalf. Now, on a site visit, the foreigner coming to do the site visit in China noticed that one of his employees, one of those 5 people, had a broken leg. And as he was there, it just so happened to be that this employee was going around to various employees and asking for a cash donation. So eventually he asked one of his top, in the hierarchy of those 5 employees, the top person, he said, why is he doing that? I feel like it's a little bit inappropriate. And lo and behold, it was discovered that the supplier was not declaring any form of social insurance for those 5 employees. What they were doing was they were issuing an invoice to the headquarters of the client, of the company, for the salary amounts, the full breakdown, salary plus social insurance, taking that, paying the net salaries to the employees, paying the individual income tax, but not doing anything with the social insurance and pocketing that for themselves. Now, the issue is you're probably asking, well, why was he never caught? Why don't the employees say something? They were in fear of losing their jobs. They had been threatened of losing their jobs. So they kept hush hush. And they weren't aware that Germany was where the headquarters, they weren't aware that Germany did not know this. They weren't aware of any of that. It was a huge revelation. So this poor guy, he had no medical insurance. He was going around asking for financial help to pay off the surgeries that he had to have on his leg, etc. And just by chance, this guy was there watching this happen, and it unfolded underneath his eyes. And obviously there were big discussions then with the suppliers. Is it a burden for employers in China? It could be. That employee could have absolutely denounced the supplier. He would have had every right to do so. In turn, the supplier would probably have then denounced the company in Germany to the Labor Bureau, to cite that they were illegally employing these people through him and no social insurance was covered. He would have passed the blame on. Worst case scenario, this German company might have been blacklisted in China. Okay. It is, again, a fundamental right for employees to have social insurance. I do not see it as a burden. Now, I wanted to finish this with tips for employers regarding social insurance in China. Okay. So at a minimum, employers that pay, so at a minimum, you need to make sure that you are paying the right social insurance contributions. You have to be careful with the calculations. It's only been 2.5 years since the Tax Bureau has taken over the obligation to receive social insurance funds. Since they've taken over that responsibility throughout the country, they have been taking it seriously to check the calculations from the employers and highlight whether there are any short payments that are made. Okay. And if there are, it leads immediately into penalties. So you need to make sure you are doing the right compensation structure for your employees and that the calculations of the social insurance are done appropriately. Employers that have not treated social insurance contributions seriously, they really need to review their practices. If any of you are using intermediaries and you've left it up to the intermediaries to make those calculations, get involved, okay? Get breakdowns of the payroll, ask questions in relation to the social insurance, make sure you're getting the right answers, and double check that information. What you don't want to happen to you is that the intermediary cheats you, does things out of his own benefit, and ultimately you get into a situation where you can't grow because your focus for the next 6 months is on employee issues that could have just been properly done if you've delved into it a little bit. Okay? So make sure you're reviewing that information. So here's another thing that you have to realize. Many companies use payroll agents to handle the payroll, which also includes the social insurance calculations for their employees. What you're probably not aware of is that when you incorporated your company in China, you could have also set up the social insurance accounts and the housing fund accounts under your company name so that you had full control over what was going into those accounts. When you are outsourcing to payroll agents, you might find that the payroll agents use their social insurance and housing fund accounts to pay those amounts, which means you don't have the transparency, visibility to see exactly what is being paid out specifically for your employees. So my recommendation is when you are incorporating your companies in China, go through that period of application to make sure that the social insurance accounts and housing fund accounts are registered under your own company in China. That way you have the control of what is being paid out, okay? And make sure you are registering those accounts in the city where your company is being registered in, not where your employees are residing in. You open one account for housing fund, one account for social insurance, where your company is located in, okay? And don't outsource that. If social insurance payments are not done on time and in full, be prepared for action taking place from the tax bureaus, okay? What you don't want to happen is that you get audited by the tax authorities. This is something that I have actually gone through. I've gone through a tax audit, not because of social insurance, but because of other positive reasons that the tax bureau wanted to delve into and discover about our company. But when you go through a tax audit, you have to account for 2 months minimum of back and forth questions, meetings. It is basically a break in your concentration and your focus in checking what your company should be doing. And it's just something you don't want to have to go through. So be prepared. If you don't pay the social, if you don't make the right calculations, you don't pay in full and you don't pay on time, be prepared that you will be audited by the tax bureaus who are receiving those funds. Be prepared for penalties. Be prepared for denouncement. Be prepared for the negative results that this may pose for your company if you don't take it seriously. All right. There could be image issues. You could have recruitment issues. You know, with all of the social media platforms, employees could go out and talk badly about you. You don't want that to happen. But ultimately, you also don't want to have the financial penalty that could come with all of that. So you've got to make sure that you are remaining in compliance when it comes to social insurance regulations. So that's the end of the presentation. I mean, it's a very short and sweet presentation because it's not a complicated topic. What I really wanted to highlight from today's session was the fact that there are companies who don't take this seriously enough. They don't plan them in the budget. They don't make the right calculations and breakdown before even hiring somebody, that it just creates a risk for your operation later on. And we want to try and avoid that. If you're looking to work with us in regards to any issues surrounding employing individuals in China, we can help you in 8 different ways. One is employment advisory, drafting employment agreements and handbooks, employee and company due diligences. We offer an employer of record service. We do work permits, residence visa applications, individual income tax calculations, and then payroll services in terms of salary payment, tax payment, and housing fund and social insurance payments. And then we also do the applications for companies that want to have the housing fund and social insurance under their own companies. So if you're interested in any of those services, let me know. If you'd like to have a one-to-one meeting, also let me know. Victoria and Hanwei, you're the only guys that are on here. If you guys do have any questions, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. I'll be hanging around a little bit more. Again, very short and sweet presentation today, but I did want to separate it out from income tax, visas, and whatnot, as sometimes the topic can get meshed into the others. So Victoria's got no questions. Hanwei, if you've got any questions, let me know. Just to finish off, we've got our final webinar tomorrow, which is all about recruiting your first employee for your China operation. How to find people, how to recruit them, how to interview them. That's all going to be touched on tomorrow. So if you're interested for that, you can register at woodburnglobal.com/events. I'd like to thank you both for joining. Again, very short and sweet presentation today. And hopefully I'll see you again in future webinars. Take care and goodbye.